Sechte Menochos daf Samach Amud Aleph. We're starting from Nun Tes Amud Beis, and it's 4 lines on the bottom. Nun Tes Amud Beis. By us, it's 5 lines on the bottom.
I'll be there in a minute.
Okay.
No today, right?
Don't forget to come. 8 o'clock it starts. I'm not going to be able to do the full share here, but we'll start now. Okay, here we go. Amar Rav Yitzchak Rav Yosef Amar Rav Yochanan. Rav Yitzchak Rav Yosef said in the name of Rav Yochanan, Nosen Mashu Shemen Al Gabi Kizayis Mincha. We're talking about a Minchas Choyta. A Minchas Choyta, no Shemen, no Levena.
No fancy.
No fancy. That's right. That's the right word. If he put a drop of Shemen on this Minchas Choyta, puzzle. He puzzled the Mincha. I told you 4 lines on the bottom. My timer. What's the reason? Because it says lo yasim. When it says lo yasim ala shemen, which is mashma sima, when it says you shouldn't put sima koldu. Sima means even a drop of shemen is going to passel it. Allah, which is what does Allah come to tell us? That the mincham which the shemen he put on adi kishiyuda is only if there's a sheikh eyes of the mincha. Then it'll be possible. Because man, if there wasn't a kezayis of mincha, he put shemen is garnish. It's nothing. Now it says nosin kezayis levina. Till now we're talking about shemen.
Right.
You're not allowed to put levina on a minchas chayta either. If he plays lepachis a minimum of a kezayis levina, Agabi mashu mincha and a little bit of the mincha. Puzzle, he puzzled the mincha. My time. What's the reason? Because benegay to Levena it says lo yitain ksiv, and when it says yitain, we have a raya from the pasuk. It means ad the ikat nesina. Biz there's a choshev shir of nesina. Levena. When you say nesina, in order that it should be chayiv, it has to be a choshev nesina, which is a kezayis. Where do we find that? So he brings the makar that Nazina is a kezayis from the pasuk V'ish ki yochel kodesh b'shgaga, and that pasuk is also talking about the Nasina. That achila was referring to the zayis, so the Nasina is also by kezayis. Zakti mara havaribuy, acharibuy. You had 2 ribuyim. You had one Allah by Shemen, and you had one Allah by Levena. And we say when you have 2 ribuyim, Allah and Allah. It comes only to exclude, meaning that the shear of the mincha, he's memay the shear of the mincha, and you're chayiv when you place levena even on a kol shehu, you're going to be chayiv kares b'mezid or malchus b'shegim. V'ikadamri, others say, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Rabbi Yosef. Boy Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is the shayla. Nasa mashu shemen al gabi kizayis mincha. If somebody put a mashu of shemen on a mincha, which was a kizayis, what's it in? Mi be'inan sima kinasina. Oilai. Does the sima? We only know that when it says nesina by levena, the lashon nesina we know it means a shir kizayis. Sima we don't find the lashon sima gefitnish by kizayis. By shemen state sima. So we want to know when it says when he places the oil, does it have to be a kezayis like Nesina? By Nesina of Levena, doesn't state Nesina Muzayin, a kezayis, it has to be a kezayis. So maybe by the Shemen also. Teiku. Tishbu Yitaritz Kushtu Bayis. Nasan Shemen al Shireha. What's if he took off the kmitza, and after the kmitza is found the Shirayim? So he put Shemen on that.
I said a few times, it's okay.
Oh, I would have thought that since it's 2 separate tzivuyim, it says Sai lo yosim and Sai lo yitain. If you want to say that he's chai for 2 lavim, let him say lo yosim Allah shemen or leveina, and we'll know for each one he's chayiv. Oh, but by shemen state lo yosim shemen, and then by leveina state lo chatzibah, but lo yitain. So it says 2 tzivuyim. What do you mean? I would have thought mishtei kahanim. That only if one kohen put shemen and one put levena, then they will be chai for both. But if one kohen did both, he's only going to be chai 1 malchus. So because the lo yosim, the separate tzivuyim, is telling us to be 2 kahanim. Talmud Allah comes the word Allah. to tell you that big gufa shel mincha kosmedava. It's not referring that lo yosim and the lo yitim to tzvei kahanim. It's talking about the mincha itself, the leiba kohen. And even if one kohen puts his shemen and lavena, he's going to be chayv tzvei mo malchus. In Muslim Zayin, it does not have to be two separate kahanim. One kohen can be chayv for both, for putting shemen and lavena. Yochel lo yitain kli. I would have thought that it's usher to place a kli which is full with shemen or full with lavena al gabi kli on the kli where the mincha is. They're not mamish mixed together. It's in a kli. The shemen or the lavena is one kli, and he put it into another kli where the kemach is. So you might be nasim ba puzzle. If he placed it in the mincha, it's going to be puzzle. That's what I would have thought.
But he didn't touch the mincha.
It wasn't touching. It was in the keli. The only time you're going to be chayiv if there's a direct contact between the lavena and the silas. If it's in two separate kelim, there's no direct contact, and it's not going to be chayiv. There are some minchas that you need a hagasha. You remember the hagasha? Any mincha that had a kmitza we learned yesterday needs a hagasha. Has to be brought to the corner of the mizbeach. Which one? The airline, Southwest. The southwest corner of the mizbeach. But it doesn't need a raising. And then there's hagasha utnufa. Then you have minchas that need sai hagasha, sai tnufa. And then you have a mincha tnufa, the hagasha. Then you have a mincha that only has a raising, but not hagasha.
Tnufa is not a hagbah, right?
Hagbah, yeah. You raise it. These are those that need hagasha, but they don't need tnufa. Mincha soilas. The mincha soilas that is somebody who says stam, he's giving a mincha, it's a mincha soilas. A mincha soilas had oil and levina mixed. V'hamachvas, a shallow pan, a macheshes, the deep pan, v'achalois, and the chalois, v'rekikin. These are two all separate menachos. Minchas kohen and the minchas of a kohen that brings his whole minchas burnt. Or minchas kohen HaMashiach is the chavitin that they brought twice. The Mary Kohen Gadol brought one in the morning, one at night. Minchas nachrim, we learned out from a yitu that ish that he can bring. A goyim can bring in a mincha. Oh, that's the nachrim. Okay, same thing. Minchas noshim. Okay, and mincha of women. Minchas chayta. Rabbi Shimon Eimer, minchas kohanim or minchas kohen Mashiach. Eimer magasha. Rabbi Shimon says, I don't agree with the Tanakama. Minchas kohen Mashiach. There's no kmitza. If there's no kmitza, there's no hagasha. If anything doesn't have a kmitza, no hagasha. Yeah. Papa said, in every place where it says the order of the Menochos, it says esetnan. When you say a mincha, it has to be eser of one min. If it's chalis, eser chalis. Rikikin, eser rikikin. Micah Mashmalan, what is he coming to teach us? Rabbi Shimon. To argue for Rabbi Shimon. The Omar that Rabbi Shimon said, even if somebody says, Arei alai machna minchas mafei, if he says, I'm taking upon myself minchas mafei. So mechza chalis, mechza rikikin. He doesn't have to do all chalis. He can do a half chalis, half rikikin.
10, how many is supposed to be?
It's 10. And he could split it half in chalis, half in wafers. Yavi, he's allowed to bring it. Kamash Malon comes Papa and teaches us the loy that he can't, because our Mishnah says there's only 10 Menochos, and amongst them there's chalos separately and rikikim. But you could add 11th one according to Reb Shimon. Chalos tzadamim mit rikikim. 5 chalos with rikikim, 5 rikikim. That's another mincha. Should have said 11, and it says es. So from where do we know these dinim of that some menachos that need agosha and some others that don't need agosha and do need nufa and some don't need either? Because nema the hevesa asher yosem eil Hashem ikibel lakoyim legisha. If the Torah would have only written the hevesa straight, left out the word esa mincha. The pasuk, the real pasuk is the hevesa esa mincha. And then goes Asher Yo'os Me'il Hashem. But here he says, if the Torah would have left out Es HaMincha and would have said straight, V'havesa Asher Yas Me'ela, Behigisha. Are you saying I would have said it only goes on the kmitza. Me'ela from the mincha, nicht the whole mincha. So mincha. How do we know the whole mincha? Also, the halacha will be that it needs hagosha. Menayim. From where do we know? Talmud lema mincha. It says s, and the hey, the s and mincha. I'm sorry, as mincha. The word mincha is extra to tell us that the whole mincha needs hagosha even before the kmitza. Not only the kmitza, but the whole mincha needs hagosha. In fact, you want a minchas chayta b'nayim? From where do we know that by a minchas chayta? That's a minchas nedava. But how do you know minchas chayta? Tamalema es ha mincha, because there's the s and the hey of ha mincha. Others say the s is extra. Others say it's the hey. So here he brings down in the Hebrew both s and the hey is anim yuteris to include a minchas chayta. Zog Yimara v'dinahu. L'chayta we could have learned it out from Asvara, from the Kavachema. Asvara. Nema have minchas chayta. Nema have minchas nodava. By both it says have to bring the mincha. And you see minchas chayta, which is a minchas chayta, it says together with minchas nedava. So I would have thought it's a mamatzino. Ma minchas nedava. I would say minchas nedava is the one that we learn out for all over. That's the pasuk. So just like minchas nedava, tuna hagosha needs hagosha. Hagosha means that before you burn the kmitza, you bring the homer's beich to the southwest corner. I told you southwest is the airline, so you always remember which corner. Af minchas chayva kituna hagosha. So too, we'll learn out as a from minchas nedava for all over that even the minchas chayva needs hagosha. You're going to ask Mala minchas nedava she came to Shema Lovena. How could you learn out minchas chayta from minchas nedava?
Two different things.
Minchas nedava needs oil and spice. A chayta comes very blah because we don't want it to look beautiful for Hashem. I could show you, even though minchas chayta doesn't have shemen lovena, it needs hagosha. So don't tell me it's the shemen lovena that makes the din hagosha. You're going to say, Mala minchas chayta shekein tuna tnufa. You're going to say minchas chayta needs that it has to be raised, but by a minchas chayta there's no tnufa. Says you want a minchas nedava techiach. Minchas nedava needs hagosha, even though there's no tnufa. So you can't say, because of the tnufa needs hagosha. It has nothing to do with the tnufa. The chazadin, each one has a mila. So you say each one's mila is nishkin siba that you need hagosha. Not the shemen lovena is a reason that you need hagosha, and not the tnufa. What's the side that they both have in common? The minchas is nedava and the minchas soita. It says the Gemara, both of them need kmitza hagosha, and they both need hagosha. Avani avi minchas chayta. It has in common with the minchas soita and minchas nedava that it needs the scooping. So Tishva hagosha, I should learn out hagosha also. Says the Gemara, you still can't learn how, because I'll say malat tzad hashav shbehem. I'll say by minchas nedava and minchas soita shkein hurshu lav be'asher uba kibeani. There, it's one carbon. Minchas soita is only one carbon for minchas soita, and the same thing by minchas nedava. But by toima the minchas chayta shalei hurshu lav be'asher. I'm sorry, lav be'asher uba kibeani, meaning that it changes. The minchas nedava, minchas soita comes through a asher, through a ani, and I'm sorry. So there, the asher brings the same thing like ani, a mincha. Asher has to bring a behema. Ani be'evian can bring a mincha, and if he's not such an ani, he has to bring a bird. But there's no one uniform carbon. That's why we needed the mincha to tell you that minchas chayta has a din of hagosha. Rabbi Shimon Hevesa, it says by the pasuk of minchas nedava the lashon hevesa. L'Rabbi is minchas ha'omer ledin hagosha, to include that minchas ha'omer also has a din hagosha. Till now we brought minchas chayta Now we're telling you, Avesa is telling you,
Well, Ema also.
Oima. Nechein hu Oima, and so it says, Avesa is Oima Reishis K'tzirchem Ela Koyin. It says Hava Sai by Minchas Nedava, and it says Hava by Minchas Oima. Reb Shimon continues, so just like by Nedava you need Agosha, so too by Oima. And Reb Shimon says, Ve'kriva l'rabis Minchas Soita. The word Ve'kriva comes to include Minchas Soita l'Hagosha, that it needs Hagosha. It says Sai by Minchas Soita, Vehikiv, and it says also by the Minchas Nedava. So we learn out that Sai, just like Minchas Nedava has Hagosha, so too Minchas Soita. Says Gemara within who? Minchas Soita, that it needs Hagosha. I can learn it out even without the Gzeda Shava of the Hevesa or the Kriva. Says how would I learn out Minchas Chait? How would I learn out automatically Minchas Chait? He says, Minchas Chait sheina tuna tnufa. Minchas Chait, you don't need a tnufa. Tuna Agosha needs Agosha. Minchas Chait shetuna tnufa. But Minchas Chait that does need tnufa and it didn't shetuna Agosha. Shouldn't it didn't be for sure it needs Agosha? You're going to ask, Mala Minchas Chait shekem ba minachitin. You're going to say, Minchas Chait is different because Minchas Chayta you bring from wheat, so it has a Maila over Saita, which comes from barley. So I could answer you, Minchas Hayma Teichiach. Minchas Hayma also is brought from barley, and it still needs Agosha. So therefore, I'll tell you therefore I'll say Minchas Chayta also. Are you going to say Mala Minchas Hayma Shekein Tuna Shem Loveina? Minchas Hayma is not the same as Minchas Chayta. Minchas Hayma needs the oil, and it needs the spice, right? And Mashain came Minchas Soita doesn't need Shemen Loveina. Says Minchas Chayta. Minchas Chayta doesn't need the Shemen Loveina, and it needs Agosha. V'chazad it goes back and forth. Later later. So you see, Sai the Inyan from Chitin is not a reason that dafka because it has Chitin it needs Agosha. And Sai mitzad the Shemen Ulavena that has Shemen Ulavena, that's the reason. Those are not reasons. We proved that it's not a reason. So since it's not a reason, they both are equal for Kmitza, Shavu Hagosha, and they both need Hagosha. So by Minchas Choyta and by Minchas Nedava, Afani of Minchas Soita, Sheshav Salam Lekmitza, that the Minchas Soita needs a Kmitza. So since it needs a Kmitza like Minchas Nedava and Minchas Choyta, Tishna Lahem LaHagosha, I would say it needs Hagosha too. So L'chayru we can learn out from Asvada, from this Kavachem. It says, by Minchas Choyta and Minchas Ha'imah, they have to come from the finest flour, from soilers. Nicht kein Kemach. Kemach is grobe Stikla. Toima Minchas Soita shel shalom Kemach. But Minchas Soita comes from thicker pieces. It's not fine flour. That's why Talmud Leimah Kriva. That's why I needed the pasuk Kriva to tell us that it needs Hagosha. Rabbi Yehuda Ima beHevesa l'Rabbeis Minchas Soita l'Din Hagosha. Rabbi Yehuda says beHevesa comes to include Minchas Soita for Hagosha. V'chein Leimah it says beHeves kabana Allah. By Minchas Soita it says also beHevi, just like it says beHevesa beHevi by Minchas Nedava. Ava Minchas Ha'imah lo tzich kra. Says Minchas Ha'imah doesn't need a pasuk. My timer. What's the reason? Medina Kasi. I can learn it out from Asvara. Uma Minchas Chayta she'ena tuna tnufa tuna Agosha madach Minchas Chayta doesn't need a tnufa, but it needs Agosha. Minchas Ha'imah shetuna tnufa and it didn't shetuna Agosha for sure. It shouldn't have to have Agosha. I don't need a pasuk for Minchas Ha'imah. Says Minchas Chayta she'kein ba mechitin. Minchas Chayta is better than the Minchas Chayta, because the Minchas Chayta comes after from weights, from wheat. Minchas Chayta, I'm sorry, Mashenkin, the Minchas Ha'imah comes from barley, so you cannot learn out Minchas Ha'imah from Minchas Chayta. Says you want Minchas Chayta Techiach that it needs Hagosha even though it comes from barley. You can say Malam Minchas Chayta she came by Levar Oven. Minchas Chait has a purpose. It's coming to check out if the lady committed the sin of adultery or not. Mashain came Minchas Mashain came with the mincha from Oima doesn't prove nothing. Says Gemara Minchas Chayta Techiach that it needs Hagasha, even though the Chayta is not coming to be Mevaras and he did a sin. So you see, Birur the Ovain or the Chitin is not a reason why you should need Hagasha. So you see, their milas are not the real reason why you need Hagasha. So we look at what they have in common, and what they have in common is what makes them have Hagasha. Shakain Shavu leKmitza, they both need Kmitza, Shavu leHagasha, and they both are equal to Hagasha. It should also have in common for Hagasha. We'll stop over here.